In 1963, Seiko decided to release their very first Seiko 5. Now the Seiko 5 had to have 5 key characteristics. It had to have a day, had to have a date, it had to have a recessed crown at the 4 o'clock position, had to be water resistant, and it had to be automatic. Now the Seiko 5 line is arguably one of Seiko's most important lines in their entire catalog, which is why when they revamped the Seiko 5 in 2019, the community was a little bit nervous. Now the first watch they ever released with this new revamped Seiko 5 line was their dive watch. Now people had divided opinions. A lot of people liked the fact they were giving a lot of options to the community, but there was a few downgrades, a few upgrades as well with that watch, so the watches were a little bit controversial. Personally, I did not handle that first Seiko 5, but then they released their second line, which is what we have today. But guys, before I get started, my name is AB, I run the Watch Collection Productions, and today we're going to be taking a look at Seiko's newest Seiko 5, which is nicknamed in the community Seiko 5KX. Now this isn't their dive watch, this is actually their more casual watch, and what drew me to this watch, unlike the dive watch, is the specifications actually kind of make more sense with this one with the 100-meter water resistance, and it kind of looked like the Black Bay 36, which I'm a really big fan of, which is why I picked this watch up, and in my opinion, it's such a great pickup. But guys, let's check out the 5KX, whether or not it's worth the price point. Now before we get on to the details and specifications of this piece, allow me to share with you the first raw impressions you get when you first unbox this watch and you first pick it up. If you've owned the SKX before, the first thing you'll notice is the size. The new size, and of course we're going to get more into detail later, is 40mm. However, one interesting thing is the watch has a crystal of around 32mm, so the watch does wear quite larger on the wrist, or it appears quite larger on the wrist. But it is 40mm and it is very comfortable. Now the second thing you notice when you unbox this piece is how casual the watch actually looks in the metal. Now I would categorize this watch as an everyday piece. It's not necessarily a dress piece and it's not necessarily a sports piece either. It's just a great everyday watch. It sort of reminds me of the Black Bay 36 for example, or the Black Bay 41. A very casual and versatile watch that if you only wanted one watch, this one would actually work pretty well. So if you've ever owned or handled a Seiko SKX, you'll know that the most disappointing part about that watch is the bracelet. Now I'm happy to tell you that the Seiko 5KX did improve the bracelet. It is very comfortable, it is very wearable, and it feels solid on the wrist. Now it isn't the best bracelet out there, but it is good enough for the price point, and they definitely improved from the new Seiko SKX. Now I'm not going to bore you too much with an in-depth history lesson, but here's what you need to know about the Seiko 5. Seiko released the first Seiko 5 in 1963, and there were 5 key characteristics, hence the name, that Seiko had to keep with their watch. Now the watch had to have a day, had to have a date, had to be water resistant, had to be durable, and of course it had to be automatic. Happy to tell you in 2020, the revamped Seiko 5, they still kept all 5 key characteristics with one big major change. The logo. Now here's why that is actually a very big deal for Seiko, more than people realize. The reason why they changed the logo is purely for marketing. The older Seiko 5 logo, Seiko knew that it was associated with more affordable watches, and Seiko was trying to go a little bit upmarket, and they wanted their entry levels to reflect that. Now with their older logo, it's already done. A lot of people just associate the Seiko 5 line with more, let's say, affordable watches. But when Seiko revamped this, first of all, the logo does look a lot better, but second, it is better marketing for them, and to be honest, the Seiko 5 is now back on the map with a lot of people that didn't consider it otherwise. Now one of the biggest changes Seiko did, even with their second gen Seiko 5KX, because the first gen still had the exact specifications as the SKX, is the size. As you guys can see, I have it next to a Nodus that's 38mm, and this watch actually comes in at 40mm. Finally, Seiko started listening to what we wanted. A lot of people enjoyed the 42mm case, but it was a little too big for many wrists, and Seiko finally created a 40mm watch. Now, one interesting thing about this watch is the crystal actually comes around 32mm, which makes the watch a lot more visible. It looks a little bit larger on the wrist, but it is very comfortable because of that 40mm size. Now, as with the first Gen 5KX, Seiko did release 9 different variants of this watch. You get blue dials, black dials, you get two-tone, you get a lot of different dial variations. But the dial I went with is that gilt dial because it has a little bit of vintage aesthetics to it. It has a matte dial, looks a lot more like the Black Bay 36, which I was a really big fan of. And in my opinion, this is one of the best looking ones alongside the blue dial. And when I handled it in the metal, I can confidently tell you it's absolutely stunning. Now allow me to share with you guys the specifications of this watch while I have it on the wrist. This watch has a 40mm case with a top to bottom, which means lug to lug of 44mm. Keep in mind, in my opinion, the lug to lug is actually more important than the diameter when you're trying to figure out if this watch will fit your wrist. Now finally, the watch does come with an 11.5mm thickness. In my opinion, making this watch very versatile. You could slide it under a cuff should you choose to dress this watch up, and the dimensions and proportions of this watch makes it a great everyday piece. Now under macro, I couldn't really find any flaws with this dial, which is actually a really good thing with an entry-level Seiko. I was expecting more problems, but everything was aligned properly. There was no blemishes. Everything looked really good. The one thing I really wish Seiko changed was that date. I really wish it was black so it could match the dial. Now the final things you need to know about this watch, it does have a mineral crystal, but it does have a double anti-reflective coating, which is why the watch looks like it doesn't have a crystal in most lighting, which actually looks really good. But there is one problem: the scratches will be very visible once you have one. Now the second thing is obviously the watch has a stainless steel case, which is mostly brushed but has hints of polishing. Now throughout my ownership with this watch, I did change the strap multiple times because of how versatile the piece actually is. Now the first strap I paired with this watch is a strap from Miles. It's a blue canvas strap. However, if you can't find that strap because they're a watch brand, you can find the exact same one in B&R bands. I think that blue contrasts really well. Now due to the fact that this watch actually has a gilt dial, of course brown earthy tones would work perfectly with this watch. For those of you who don't know, gilt just stands for a black and gold dial. As you guys can see, this is probably the best strap you could go with if you buy this specific model. It just contrasts perfectly with that dial in my opinion, and it looks absolutely stunning with this Barton Bands leather strap. Now as I mentioned, this watch is extremely versatile, so I decided to dress it up a little bit with a black Saffiano strap from the company called Veblenist. In my opinion, it looks absolutely stunning, and this is actually my favorite watch strap. Now finally, I wanted to talk about the caliber inside this watch. It's powered by the 4R36 caliber. Now keep in mind, the 4R36 isn't the most accurate caliber out there. However, it is still an upgrade from the original 7S26. It has hacking and hand winding, and as you guys can see, the watch does have a display back, which is actually very important for new watch enthusiasts, people who are first getting into the brand. In my opinion, a display back is a must for your first mechanical watch. But guys, hopefully you enjoyed this review. Please let us know in the comment section below. Did you like the Seiko 5KX? What didn't you like about it? Let us know in the comments. And guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.